Today, I want to talk about certainty because I used to think that certainty was the goal, and I'm not so sure anymore. I grew up as a missionary kid in Nairobi, Kenya. My dad was a pastor. I spent my 20s building a church where we grew from 12 people meeting into a living room to getting into a building and running 3 services. I think we had like 500 or so at that point. I was running music, doing all the things, right? I would call myself a professional Christian in that season. And I really felt strongly that if I could just believe the right thing strong enough and I could defend it clearly, some of you know the term apologetics, that meant that I was doing something right, that I was faithful and growing. Certitude felt like a way towards growth. That if I was becoming more convinced of the things that I believe, I was probably moving in the right direction. Certainty feels safe, it feels clean, and it can often feel like solid ground. But a few years ago, I hit this point where I'm a very visual person, and I was in my room and I was praying, and it kind of felt like as words were coming out of my mouth, they would go up and they would hit the ceiling and they would just bounce right back at me. And my words weren't going anywhere anymore. My faith felt stuck. I was very unsure of things that I used to be certain of. And it wasn't just a time of doubt. It began to force in me this like quiet panic, I would call it, where I was going, if I'm not certain of this, this, and this, how do I even know who I am? And there was a lot of my identity that was built on being in the in-group, that had the truth, that was evangelizing to other people, trying to get them to believe like us. And I wasn't convinced of it anymore. I didn't necessarily feel confused as much as I felt exposed. And the world felt very big all of a sudden. And I was very aware of how the thing I believed was like one room in a massive house or in a subdivision. And I had spent my whole life in this one tiny room. And so that's where my whole journey began, to start to think about certainty differently. And if you're stumbling onto a video like this, you're either there or you're curious about people that are there. Maybe you have someone you love that you really care about, and they're in a season of deconstructing or rethinking what they believe about the world, and it feels unsettling. So welcome, and let's talk about it. And I'm just going to share my experience because I know everybody is on their own journey. What works for me might not work for you, and that's totally cool. But I also think it's really helpful, and it definitely has been helpful to me to hear other people who have gone through similar things. And so everything I say here, take what you want, leave the rest of it. Hopefully some of it resonates. But when it comes to certainty, I think the first thing that I've noticed is once I started to see it, I was shocked by how much my certainty was holding me together. That what I called conviction was actually, it was tied to my identity. And what I mean is that if someone was to come in and go, hey, Benji, like, why do you believe this certain thing? It didn't feel intellectual. So I'll give you an example. When we start to talk about my beliefs on hell, or why I am, at that time, I was non-affirming of the LGBTQ community, right? And so I felt like if I didn't have a perfect defense, if I wasn't certain around how I thought about these things, right? Because the Bible says it, so I believe it, that settles it. It felt personal to not have the answer. And so when I started to have questions come at me, and it felt like it was not just, hey, would you ever reconsider it, or have you looked at it from this angle? It felt more personal than that. It felt like a personal attack. Like I had to defend it because truth has to be defended. More than that, as it started to attach to my identity, right? Which some of that was it just happens over time. You're in a certain group, the bubble is there. You start to all think a certain way. You have language that reconfirms these things. And there's an advantage because you're an in-group. You actually see this on social media a lot because the algorithm gives you more of things that you already want to see. And so there's an in-group. There's just a culture that's created, and it makes it makes your world feel ordered and safe, and this is how we do things here. This is how we operate. And in religion, this can actually, now being semi-removed from it, I see also the scary side of this. Because if we're the in-group and we feel ordered and safe, we very much feel like there's an out-group that is not safe, not secure, and that we need to change. And we definitely have the right answers, and they definitely have the wrong answers. So maybe we shouldn't even trust them. You get it. One of the things in this season I think that most broke my brain, and to some people this is going to sound so trivial because of course, no duh, my entire life this has been true, but I just never thought about it from this perspective, that there are literally thousands of religions out there, and there are tens of thousands of denominations. So then imagine I'm laying in my bed and I pray the prayer and it hits the ceiling and it bounces back towards me. And I go, there's lots of religions. There's lots of denominations. We can't even agree within Christianity about some of this stuff, most of this stuff. What are the odds that I was born into the exact right version of Christianity, the exact right beliefs about Jesus? There's a cynical way of taking those questions where you end up in a sort of, well, then none of it matters. I think that's not where I ended up. Instead, over years of thinking about this stuff, it helped me loosen my grip and not take my belief and my certainty so seriously. Because we all know that some of our beliefs are wrong. We're not sure which ones are wrong, and we would probably try to defend all of them, which is a very interesting place to be, where you think you're right, or you obviously wouldn't believe these things until somebody presents something to you that's compelling enough that you change your mind. And once you change your mind, you realize you were wrong all along. We don't know where we're wrong, but we are wrong about something. And if we're willing to admit that, I think that cracks the door open to some level of, in my case, curiosity. After in some ways, I moved on from church. After I decided I needed a break, I remember it was hard for me to even listen to podcasts about different religions because I was afraid someone would see my phone and judge me. I got very curious about Buddhism. I got very curious different ways that atheists even see the world and why we're here. And I'm listening to these different pieces of content. I'm talking to people more about psychology. I'm reading books on deconstruction and on progressive Christianity, things that were off limits to the group that I was formerly in, and still felt in many ways like, can I go back and be a part of that thing, right? I wasn't even sure that I was, going to be gone forever, but I felt like I needed to go explore. I needed curiosity to have reign in my life, but I was still so scared because certainty gave me safety for so long that I didn't want people to see my books. Like I remember being in coffee shops and I would turn my book covers over so that the back of the book would be on the table, out of habit, out of not wanting someone to walk in and having to answer questions. Or you'd have to defend reading things that were outside of your belief system, right? Because this is what happens in Christianity. If you're watching this and you think this is crazy, I agree. But if you grew up in this, this is true. That if you're just reading content about another religion, right? Like let's take a more controversial one. If I was to be reading the Quran as a Christian, I don't get bonus points for going outside of my team's holy book, the Bible, and reading somebody else's holy book. That docks me points because that's bad to be even entertaining those thoughts. That's how I thought. I wish that wasn't true, right? Because if truth is truth, right? And then it doesn't need to be defended. It's just true. I don't need to defend if I'm breathing in oxygen or if gravity functions. if things are at that level true, we're going to bump into that truth no matter where we look or what we explore or what we go digging into. And if what we believe or have a hypothesis on does happen to be true, it should be reinforced when we go outside of the typical things that we find comfort in. So I noticed that defending my beliefs had actually made me less curious. I would give credit if I remember who said it, but early on in this phase, back in 2020, 2021, I heard someone talk about pinning down the butterfly. And if you know what I'm talking about, this metaphor, give credit to whoever said this in the comments. But the butterfly metaphor goes like this, that the beauty of a butterfly is the butterfly in flight. And when we take the butterfly down and we start to analyze it, maybe for a few minutes, when we pin that butterfly, like a science project, to a piece of styrofoam, we pin it down and we look at the colors on it or whatever. Maybe that's beautiful for a second, but a butterfly was made to fly. You don't pin down the butterfly to study it forever. You are amazed by the beauty of the butterfly in flight. And it is also true about things that are transcendent, that since the beginning of humanity, we've been debating things about God and why we're here, and it will go on after us. And the conversation is the beautiful part. It's not the pinning down the butterfly and saying, this is exactly what a butterfly is, right? Now, when we start to do that with things like God, and we think that we have God figured out, or that through the Bible, there's only one way of seeing it because you just read the text, it limits your scope and your ability to be curious about things around you. Or let me not even project. That's what it did for me. Maybe it's not doing that to you, but that is what it did to me. And so I started to realize I don't want to pin down the butterfly anymore. Was I defending the truth, or was I just trying to protect myself? Because changing your mind is also a hard thing. Admitting that you're wrong, right? Like, especially if you feel like you have the corner on the market for the truth about God, about why we're here. And then you have to admit that you no longer have that. That's going to do massive damage to your ego. In this season, I also heard a story about an elephant. And the idea is there's, call it 5 guys in a room, guys or gals, and the lights are turned off, so it's pitch black. And they're all feeling in the dark, trying to decide what they're touching. And one person's touching the leg of an elephant, and one person's touching the tail, and someone has a tusk, and someone has an eye, whatever it is. And they're all debating and arguing with each other, and someone says it's a tree, and someone else, they're just coming up with hypotheses of what is this thing that we're touching, and no one's coming to the conclusion that it's an elephant because they're only touching the one part that they're touching. There's scripture that backs this up, that we see through a glass dimly. And there's this realization that within our limited scope of things, we try to paint the full picture, but we only see in part. And I think that when it comes to things that are transcendent, I want to hear from other people's perspectives what they feel like they've, quote unquote, like touched in their lives. And maybe I had the joy of touching the trunk, and somebody else has had the joy of touching a leg. And they've seen God show up in different ways or with different words. I love that. And I want to be more curious about that. And I want to hear other people's angles on why we're here and why this all matters, and how to love each other and how to coexist together better, and how to chase truth together in a way that doesn't lock us down and pin down the butterfly, but instead makes us more curious. The last point that I want to talk about is just that letting go of certainty made me more curious, not less faithful. And this one's hard to articulate because I think I'm still unpacking it. But because we worshiped certainty and we had to have right belief, when you started to pull the thread and you didn't think the way you thought anymore, you started to feel like, well, I nope, I'm not going to say you, I'm going to say me. I started to feel like I can't follow God anymore because that God I don't think exists, right? That's part of it. And it's also like this pursuit of trying to look like I have my beliefs together started to feel very much like the wrong pursuit. Honesty felt like the better pursuit. Being hyper curious and asking more questions felt like the better pursuit. Releasing the need to be right actually started to create more space for wonder and for being wrong about things and being happy when I was wrong about things and turning the gem and looking at things I had heard my whole life from a different perspective. But that doesn't make you less faithful. Like think about it in the context of a relationship. If I, with my wife, if I had to be certain that I knew her perfectly, and that's what proved my faithfulness to her, I think it would create a very static relationship. She would become almost 2D, where it's like, I know everything about her. She's this list of facts. There's not much new, right? Because it's all in this book of stuff about her. Instead of approaching it from this place of like, I want to continue to learn things about her for the rest of my life. And when I learn something new, it doesn't mean that I'm, less faithful. It means that I am continuing my pursuit of curiosity and being amazed by who she is. The same is true about things that are transcendent and beyond us. The same is true about life as a whole. You don't want to come to a place where you think you have it all figured out. You want to come to a place of, wow, there's so much more to learn, so much beyond me. I want to continue to be amazed by things. And so when I realized that I actually can pursue truth outside of the small room that I'm living in, and I can go explore the entire subdivision, I can go explore the entire earth full of amazing things, and that's not less faithful. That being in awe, being in wonder is foundational, while certainty is not. Certainty actually, in many ways, as it starts to damper the mystery of this world we live in, it dampers our ability to be amazed, to stand in awe of things that are beyond our comprehension. When you leave one version of fundamentalism, your chances of going to another version are very high. And so I don't want to settle into any like belief that becomes dogma. But I do still believe that we continue to wrestle with ideas and we just leave our hands open. And so on these things, I have changed my mind, and I will continue to change my mind on future topics because I think that is the best way to go about things, and that we should debate and argue and have conversation where we believe the best about each other and we change our mind. And that's not a negative thing. That's a positive thing because we're students our whole life long. I started to find beauty and wisdom in places that I wasn't told to look, and it became gratifying. And it began to feel like I was digging for gold. I would read books, and I'm listening to podcasts, and I have playlists on Spotify of things that are completely different than ways that I used to look at the world. And it's been gratifying to do that. Because if something's true, it doesn't actually need protection. Truth doesn't panic when it's explored. Truth doesn't need to flinch. It just is there for you to continue to unpack. I don't feel certain anymore, but I do feel a lot lighter. And if you're in a place where you want that too, maybe you're taking yourself too seriously, like, man, I invite you into it, because weirdly, I feel much more alive now. All right. We're going to wrap this up. Thank you for listening to this. And if it did resonate with you and you felt like maybe there's a tension, or you're walking through this with somebody where they're feeling this, maybe you send it to a friend. I would love to hear your story. So please feel free to reach out to me or drop a comment on where you're changing your mind and how you've continued to wrestle with this certainty versus curiosity piece. And we'll go on the journey together. If you like conversations like this, I would ask you to subscribe. I'm starting to make more videos on identity, belief, and meaning, and the undercurrents, the things that are behind the thing. So, all right. this was fun. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.